We'll begin with a quotation. Then candidate Barack Obama in July 2008, quote, "It's like these guys, Republicans, take pride in being ignorant. They should go talk to some experts and actually make a difference," close quote.
Well, talking to experts does make a difference. Many of the great disasters of our time have been committed by experts. You may remember FDR's brain trust, which, according to later studies, prolonged the Depression by several years. The whiz kids in the Pentagon under McNamara, who managed to mess up the Vietnam War. You can run through an impressive list of things, of disasters brought about by people with very high IQs.
You refer to intellectuals in society. Whom do you mean?
I mean people whose end products are ideas. There are other people with great intelligence whose end products are things like the Salk vaccine.
A research scientist is not necessarily an intellectual.
That's right.
An engineer isn't necessarily an intellectual.
That's right. Because the engineer is judged by the end product, which is not simply ideas. If he builds a building that collapses, it doesn't matter how brilliant his idea was, he's ruined. Conversely, if an intellectual who's brilliant has an idea for rearranging society, and that ends in disaster, he pays no price at all.
So the intellectual temptation is to say, look, we already know everything.
That's right.
If only we also had
the power,
all the power,
yes,
everything would be just fine.
Yes.
And what's wrong with that view? Why isn't that a sensible view?
One, they don't know everything. They don't know 1/10 of everything. In fact, I argue that they probably don't know 1% of the consequential knowledge in a society.
Consequential knowledge is a concept that runs through this book. Explain that concept.
Knowledge whose presence or absence has consequences, serious consequences. I mean, I was once in a plane that was coming down for a landing in the Ithaca airport, and suddenly the pilot gunned the motor and went up again because someone in the control tower had reminded him that he hadn't lowered his landing gear. So that was consequential knowledge,
right?
Yes, yes. I was just delighted that person had his eyes open and his mind on his work.
So the notion here is that the kind of knowledge, the kind of consequential knowledge required to prove effective in governing a nation, such as the United States, with the biggest economy in the world, 300 million people, you can put together quite a large group of professors, and they're still not going to possess the knowledge that would enable them to run General Motors, for example, or to run the nation's healthcare system, for example.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of the things that has happened all around the world in the 20th century was that all sorts of countries have tried central planning. Now, the guys who run the central planning, they usually have advanced degrees from prestigious institutions. They have mountains of statistics sitting there, and they have all the experts of the country at their beck and call. And yet, when you take the power out of their hands and return it to the market, then all the hundreds of millions of people who don't have any of those things usually end up with a higher rate of growth and a more rapid decline in poverty.
Listen to a list, and then I'll ask you a question. Chairman of the Fed, Benjamin Bernanke, BA at Harvard, PhD at MIT, Professor of Economics at Princeton, Director of the National Economic Council, Lawrence Summers, undergraduate degree MIT, Doctor at Harvard, youngest tenured Professor of Economics and Harvard History, eventually President of Harvard, Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner, AB Dartmouth, MA Johns Hopkins. He's the underperformer in the group. How did this group of intellectuals acquit themselves in handling the nation's economic crisis in 2008?
Well, first of all, they didn't handle it. The politicians handled it.
Ah.
And so even if you were to say that these guys really could have done a great job had they had the unbridled power and so forth, they don't have the unbridled power. One of the problems with experts is that experts are hired by other people. And so you never know what the expert would have done. In fact, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal some time back that what the policies that are being followed in Washington are the direct opposite of the policies that Summers advocated when he published before he got to Washington.
Right. Right.
So we should never assume that experts are just people there supplying information to politicians who are trying to do good.